Today's podcast is a part of a series about the members of a network that I am a part of called Women Execs on Boards. All of the women in this series have completed programs through the Harvard Business School to prepare them for corporate governance. I wanted to tell their stories because I'm so inspired by the women who are in this network. They are high-level, high-profile women, but when you look behind the scenes, you see that they have worked very hard to get to where they are. They've been through so many different trials, traumas, and they've just kept getting back up and climbing and working hard to get to the top. And the really amazing thing is that they're leaving the ladder down and reaching back down in the organizations to pull up other women and men into leadership positions. And so I can't wait for you to hear their story. I hope you enjoy this podcast series. Welcome to Real Life, Real Leaders. Today, I'm really excited to bring to you our guest, Nathalie Villette. She is the UK country head and group head of global corporates for EcoBank. Welcome to the program, Nathalie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bonnie.
So we want to hear about your exciting career. You've done so much and have really progressed through the finance world, but obviously you didn't start there. So tell us a little bit about where you're from. And today I think you're calling in from London, but give us a little bit of background about you.
Thank you, Bonnie. That's correct. So I'm based in London, but I'm originally from West Africa, Francophone West Africa. I was born in France, but my parents moved to West Africa when I was 1. So my mom is from Burkina Faso. It's a very small country in Francophone West Africa. It used to be a former French colony, and my dad is French. So I grew up in a biracial household, very humble, but very loving. My parents looked after my mom's siblings, brothers and sisters and cousins. So though I'm an only child, I grew up in a really big family, African style, as part of a big community. And it was a lovely experience. Burkina Faso is a poor country. I was exposed from a very early age to difficult situation, poverty, struggle. And that really helped me build that resilience as I grew up. So I guess that my mom is probably the person who mostly influenced who I have become. She had to stop school at the age of 13 to look after her siblings when her mom became blind. And she really instilled in me the value of education from a very early age on. So that's, that is me growing up in Africa and then moving on to France later.
What a great example with your parents. And like you said, my son's adopted from Russia, but, the love makes the difference, right? Just being
Absolutely.
able to have that support around you, even when you have poverty, even when there's a lack of food, if you have the love, that's what I noticed with him is he was in a loving environment and it made all the difference.
Absolutely. Very important.
Very important. So, that's great that your mother realized the importance of the education, even though she wasn't able to complete hers. And so how did you make the transition from the African country into, to go get the university degree?
Absolutely. So basically, I went to the French lycée, Burkina Faso being a former French colony. You have, French schools and lycée. Secondary schools. So when I finished my international baccalaureate, I went back to France to study. So this was very much, the norm at the time. And this was a big transition, moving from Africa to France and adjusting to the life, adjusting to the culture, adjusting to a very individualistic world, that was hard. But at the same time, I was very, happy to be on a campus with different students from other countries in Africa coming to France to study. And, I spent 5 great years studying economics and ended up in Paris at Paris Dauphine. And that is where I decided to enter a banking career. At the time, I really wanted to become an economist initially because I wanted to be able to go back and give to my country. So I had in mind working for the World Bank and, doing amazing things. But I remember at the time I met a World Bank senior who said to me, the best thing you should do is to go into investment bank. And from then on, once you've actually acquired the skills and, have acquired the experience, you could then potentially work for the World Bank. It never happened, but that's how it started initially.
Well, and you have a lot left to give. We never know what's going to happen next.
Exactly. So I was
maybe you'll end up there yet.
We will see. But so I actually
or on the board, maybe you'll end up on the board.
Yes. Yeah, we will. Yeah. So I started my career in London in 2000. I was recruited via the analyst training program, which most global banks have, where they recruit, a young cohort of analysts to work for them. And these were 13 gruesome years of hard work. And for me, particularly being a young female of color in a very white environment, male-dominated environment, but very formative. I learned a lot, and I think that in a way, I was able to progress in my career later on because I had acquired those skills, in a very disciplined environment at UBS. So very formative, but difficult to adjust from a culture standpoint.
Well, that's interesting because I saw that, in your profile, the work that you had done at UBS and, I'm sure that is a culture shock. I mean, you're having to go through multiple culture shocks, going from the African, very community oriented environment to France, and then into such a structured banking environment. What were some of the biggest adjustments you had to do for culture?
So the biggest adjustment was, of course, in investment bank, you advise clients. The aim is to advise and really make money. So the constant focus on doing as much money as possible was something for me which was actually difficult initially because I learned that you need to do right as opposed to just do good. So the rhythm was also very difficult. I think that we were under a lot of pressure constantly, long hours, very few weekends. And I remember at the time, my mom asked me, is this a normal way of working? Why do you guys work so much? What for? What's the purpose of all of that? And obviously, becoming a young mother became very difficult. I had two children. The first, I was 30, and I was the only female at the time to have to take maternity leave in my team. And it was very difficult coming back, very difficult. I felt that I think that they view the maternity leave as a holiday, and it was such a difficult time. You come back in a very competitive environment and you're having to readjust. Right. And my senior MD once said to me, and I was taken aback, he said, "Why are you back, Nathalie? You should be home looking after your baby. Why are you back in this team?" Because, he couldn't believe I had decided to come back. So it was very difficult, but I ended up having to really slow down my career progression at the time because I wasn't staffed on the most complex transactions. I think they were trying to make adjustments for me, and I was trying to manage it all, if you will. But clearly, my career took a bit of a, deceleration at the time.
Right. Yes. And we're seeing that with a lot of women, even still today. And some men are starting to be the ones to take the time off as well. But yeah, I'm sure at that point, it was quite the anomaly for you to come back and choose to continue your career. Were both of your children, were they both when you were at UBS?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So when did you transfer? Talk about moving to the Eco Bank, because you've had a successful career, very successful career there. What made you make the jump, and when did that happen?
Excellent. So I was approached by a headhunter. At the time, EcoBank had opened an office in London, and it's true that initially I thought, oh, working for an African bank, you're coming from UBS, it's a small African bank, but it's probably the greatest move I've ever done. And I think that in the end, looking back with hindsight, I wish I had done it sooner, because you are given the space and the freedom to really make a difference. I think that, and actually build and really have an impact that is, meaningful. You work for a global bank, you do amazing things, but at the end of the day, I think for women or women of color, I think there is a glass ceiling, or at least there used to be a glass ceiling. I mean, I do not recall having seen a Black woman at the time in an investment bank over the years that I was there, at least senior. So, you can't really be what you can't see. Whilst, in EcoBank, once I made the decision to move, I thought, let me leverage my experience for the benefit of a bank that ultimately tries to do good in Africa. Everything needs to be built on the continent. They need talent. And it's true that a lot of African people would rather work for European or American banks, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to bring our experience and talent to the service of the development of our continent. So it ended up being a natural move.
Well, and what an opportunity to take your background from where you grew up to be able to bring that back and give of your talents back to your country. That's fantastic. Today's podcast is brought to you by EDA, a human capital firm that provides leadership development for your top of the house executives. One of our services is succession planning. The reason companies need succession planning is because the quality of a leadership team is a key differentiator for every organization. It's not about forcing anyone to leave their position or retire. Rather, it's proactively analyzing the talent and ensuring that your organization has highly qualified and well-developed leaders in all mission-critical positions, not just today, but tomorrow, next year, and even 5 years from now. If you're interested in succession planning for your organization, please reach out to learn more at www.executivedevelopment.com. So it looks like, you're at such a great level already. What are some of your aspirations? What would you like to do next? I mean, I should qualify that. We're in the same network. So the Women Execs on Boards, the group that came from Harvard, that are prepared for corporate board seats. So I know one of your aspirations, and you may already be on several boards, but what else?
So yeah, I am on the board of a bank in East Africa, and clearly this is very close to me because, or close to my heart. There's a lot of governance issues in developing countries, and it's critical to have people with the right mindset to challenge management. So I think there's a lot that I hope I will be able to do later on. But I think where I would like to be is in a position where I could have a broader impact into building capacity in Africa to help the continent rise. Capacity is a big issue. We have great companies, great banks, but it's very slow because we do not have the right competences, if you will. So We're starting from a very low base, and being able to have a say in how you manage that workforce, how you train people to gain in capacity and be able to interact at the same level as other global banks or global institutions is very dear to me.
Yeah, so something where you could actually accelerate their development.
Absolutely.
It's almost like country high potentials.
Exactly.
Getting them to raise up. Yeah, that's a great aspiration.
Yeah.
And the other question I have, so, you mentioned you have a family, and, that was a difficult time, but, most of us have something in our career where it was so hard that we weren't sure we were going to be able to keep going. And so have you had any experiences that were especially hard that you
Yes,
had to
very
get
hard.
through?
Yes. So I had two experiences. The first is after I've had my children, after a few years. So my daughter was 6, my son was 3. I could really feel that the hours, it was very difficult to manage it all. And I got to a point where I asked myself, do I give up? Because what you realize in investment bank, at least at the time, a lot of women would tend to leave a few years after they had their children because it's just simply not manageable. And it's harder, I think, for women. I mean, it used to be, at least. And the second experience, I believe, was 7 years ago when my husband left for South Africa to take a job, and I decided not to follow him. And that was a very difficult decision. And I
Yes.
think, the norm expects that you follow your spouse or your partner and you were able to move along, but for me, it was something that I really wanted to focus on my career. And then the resulting situation was that I became a single parent. He's left, it's been 7 years now, and having to manage two teenage children, as well as extensive travel at work, is difficult, very difficult. But, I don't regret a second.
Yes, both of those are things that I think people deal with more often than not. I would say, especially, I've heard of a lot of women struggling with whether or not to follow their spouse who's going to another city, state, whatever country. But let's talk about the child care. When you had the young children, you're trying to decide what to do. How did you work through it? How did you make the decision to continue? And then how did you just practically deal with that, from a working mom standpoint?
Sure. So what I did is that I was able to get some help. So I had so here in the UK and in Europe generally, you have nurseries, which is it's something that we don't realize, but are critical to retaining women in the workforce. So from the age of 3 months old, you can actually, bring your baby to the nursery, and that doesn't cost that much. It's very often sponsored by the states, which, allow women to be able to work. And then, to manage really the long hours, I had, at the time, my husband, Keely, was also working in banking, so very busy, but I had a wonderful nanny who worked with us for many years. And I was lucky to have that support over the years with 3 wonderful women, whom I think whom I wouldn't be able to achieve what I have achieved. And that is, I think, being able to seek support and nurture that help is very, very important.
I agree. I mean, and that's one of the things sometimes we do think we have to do it all ourselves. And I just, for any mothers out there, I don't know a single woman who's made it to a high level in their career who hasn't had help.
Absolutely.
So it's okay to ask for help.
Yes.
And the other one, thinking about whether or not to follow your spouse versus, your career, we have this sort of, I have it with the working mom, it was like always the guilt is like, one or the other, which is the right thing. Did you experience guilt, as you were trying to decide, like, do I feel like selfish? And then how did you decide, okay, no, I've got to do this for me, because this is a process so many women have to work through, and maybe some men too, so let's talk
Absolutely.
about how do you make those kinds, just sort of sorting it out.
Yeah, so I did feel guilt. First of all, I come from a family environment where, you need to follow your spouse. I mean, there's no question about it. So I think it came to a huge, it came to my family and close friends, I think, with a certain shock as to, you're really letting your spouse go and you're staying in London. But I think it was so evident to me that there is no way that I would have sacrificed all the hard work, gotten to a point where finally my kids were relatively independent, for me to say, basically, I'm going to put my career aside and and do something else, which wasn't really meaningful to me, and still is. I really believe that, yes, there is guilt, but at the end of the day, it's you need to stay true to your purpose, and everything falls into place eventually. So I think daring not to do things which people expect you to do is one thing that is key, and owning your own story, and not being conventional. I think it was difficult, but I think it's I don't look back, and I think it was the right decision.
I agree, and you hit on a really important point is about making your own path, and it being unconventional, and sometimes that is the right thing. Like, I was listening to the book about our recently passed Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she was talking about how she had to make those decisions early on, and she had to have people around her who supported her, whether she happened to have a spouse who supported her, but sometimes we don't have that. And so just, having other people who weighed in and said, we'll support you no matter what. But I'm proud of the decision that you made to stay the course. And I know you're having a great impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
If you had to look back at your younger self and, give yourself some advice, is there anything you would say that, maybe you have changed or just you wish you had known?
Sure. I think I would probably say to my, younger self, don't be afraid of challenges. Don't be afraid to fail. I think with hindsight, my mom, who really wanted to make sure that, I worked hard, I succeed. I didn't really have the opportunity for failures. It was, you need to succeed. And then with life, obviously, you realize that successes are made of failures behind. There is no way you can just succeed without failure. So definitely, I think this would be something I would, have here at the back of my mind. But otherwise, yeah, I think this would be the most important thing.
Right. You're making a really good point about you can't succeed without failure. So, if someone isn't failing, they're probably not doing anything.
Absolutely. So, and I think, increasing, what I see around us is that people are so, a lot of people, you realize, pretend as opposed to be. They and we live in a world where it's all about, showing our successes, just giving that image that is glowing, but, really behind, if you are true to yourself, it's you should be able to talk about the failures, and not be ashamed. So I think
not pretend, like you said.
Exactly.
Like, no one wants the fake, inauthentic, persona.
Absolutely.
We want to see the real thing. Do you get to go home, other than COVID, our global pandemic? Before that, do you get to go home and see your family and talk about, tell me about that. So tell me about going back home now to your community and with your success.
Yeah, correct. So with my work, I used to travel at least 2 weeks a month over the past 3.5 years. In Africa. So Africa, as you know, is made of several countries, 54. And I spent time in Burkina Faso. I still have family there, though my parents live in south of France. And it's always very gratifying to go back and see the family and how the country is also progressing. It's great. So I really enjoy traveling to Africa and spending time there. Yeah.
Is there anything you've been able to do with EcoBank for your country that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so we've been able to finance a certain number of acquisition in the telecom sector, as well as in the power sector as well. So it's a country that is producing gold. So we have a lot of mining, but apart from that, the country is landlocked. So there's no access to sea. So we have cotton, rice, gold, but the booming industries are very much telecom. Because of mobile banking, because of telecom operators wanted to make sure that there is full coverage in those poor countries. So there's a lot happening. It's fascinating.
That is fascinating. And what about is your mother still living?
So my mom is still living, yes, and she. So I haven't seen her since the summer, but she often comes twice a year, and yeah, she's an amazing person.
And what does she think about your roles and what you've been able to do?
She's very proud. She's proud, and sometimes she's very afraid. So when she knows that I'm traveling, I'll tell her, "Oh, I'm going to Mozambique, to Sierra Leone." She knows these are difficult countries, so she's always very worried for my safety. But she's proud. She says to me, "I've had one child, but I'm so happy because you are happy. And if I were to die today, I know that you can handle your children, and you wouldn't have to seek for help. You can stand on your 2 feet." I think this was something that was very, very dear to her. I remember growing up, she would say to me, "Your first job, your first husband is your job," she said to me. "So you need to make sure you have a good job so that you are financially independent." And that really, stuck to me. Yeah.
Wow, your mom's so wise. We should have her on. So that's great. Thank you, Nathalie.
Thank you,
has been so interesting. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your story. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
A special thank you to our listeners for taking time to tune in to this week's Real Life, Real Leaders podcast. We hope today's story inspired you. Check out previous episodes on the podcast to hear from more industry leaders, and check back next week as we speak to another leader and hear his or her great stories of triumphs and messy struggles. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. I'm Bonnie Hageman, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.